You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network. This is Talking Headways, a weekly podcast about sustainable transportation and urban design. I'm Jeff Wood. This week we're listening to a one-on-one conversation between St. Paul developer Johnny Opara of JO Companies and Leah Hargett, principal of Jog Associates. They talk about LISC's capacity building programs that support developers of color, why Johnny got into development, and barriers people of color face in the market. Stay with us. Today's podcast was produced in partnership with Railvolution. For a deeper dive on livability issues or more information about the annual conference live in Miami, go to railvolution.org. That's railvolution.org. Today's podcast is brought to you by our super generous Patreon supporters. Thanks to everyone that supports the show each month. It's super appreciated. To join this merry band of zoning nerds and infrastructure wizards, go to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. $2 a month gets you a handwritten note and some stickers. $10 a month gets you our bus-only scarf. And I'll be putting in an order soon for a new edition, our bike-only scarf, full of fresh Kermit. We'll also have more information soon on how to pre-order from our new batch of bus and bike-only scarves, so stay tuned. Also, because we do a lot of episodes covering a lot of books, we've partnered with bookshop.org as an affiliate. This means that if you buy a book through the Overhead Wire shop on Bookshop, a small amount of that purchase goes to us. Now, we love when you order from your local bookstores, but if you want to support the authors we have on the show and help keep us interviewing them, that would be tremendous. All the books we've ever discussed on the show with the authors are now in the shop. That's bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. That's bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. And finally, check out the Overhead Wire Daily Newsletter, established in 2006. We were doing it way before anyone else thought it was cool. Join thousands of readers and sign up for a 2-week trial at theoverheadwire.com to check it out. That's a 2-week free trial at theoverheadwire.com.
Good morning, Johnny. How are you today?
Doing good. Good morning, Leah. How are you?
Fine. I'm Leah Hargett, Chief Strategy Consultant with Jog Associates. Jog is a Minnesota-based boutique consulting firm specializing in strategy and planning, business management, program design and action, and transitional leadership. Why don't you give us a little understanding about who you are as well, Johnny?
Well, thank you, Leah. I appreciate it. And thank you to Hillary Reeves and Gretchen Nichols and Peter McLaughlin at LISC for this opportunity, and also Railvolution as well. My name is Johnny Opara, and the name of my company is JO Companies. Started the company back in 2009 at the heart of the recession. And this has always been a culmination of just different ideas over the last 12, 13 years in terms of me getting to this point. I think as anyone that's an entrepreneur knows that you have to go through numerous businesses to get to something that actually catches flight. So JO Company is really an organization that's focused on real estate development, focused on specifically affordable housing, but really making sure that we can bring housing that's affordable, but with a market rate feel. A lot of the cities and folks that I'm talking to surrounding real estate is really interested in seeing how we can make sure that people who are looking to live somewhere that's economical, but at the same time can live somewhere that's nice. So for me, from a fundamental standpoint, it's really aligning with my father and his experiences and trying to see how we can make other people who have similar experiences live somewhere they can be proud of.
One thing I do know about you is how important family is, and the influence that your dad has had has been really significant in the current iteration of your entrepreneurial venture and who you are. I mean, I can't wait to see what you do even after this, but thanks so much for giving us that background. You know, I'm kind of curious about what has also sparked you, or is there a specific event that made you want to be a developer, you know, to play a role in how cities or communities are shaped? I think that, you know, we all know that being a developer is not an easy haul, and you're brilliant. You could have done anything, but you chose development, real estate development, and in a time that is still very challenging for us as people of color. So can you give us some sense of like, what was it that inspired you?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a really great question. I remember back when I was in college, I didn't want to just work a job just to work a job. You know, in life, you have a few moments where you can kind of look back and say, I wish I could have did this. I wish I could have did that. But I think for me, just growing up, being exposed to my father having a stroke when I was 12 years old did something to me in terms of me being serious about my health, me being serious about life, knowing that it's not going to be forever. So from a young age, I've always tried to figure out how can I do something that, one, allows me to take care of myself financially, but at the same time allows me to do something meaningful that's going to allow me to help, change people's lives. That led me to a path of, one, wanted to get into medical device, pharmaceutical sales. That path I did cross. I did get into medical device, and that was a great experience, but didn't really align. So I started trying to figure out, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of different, businesses that I wanted to, get into. In 2009, after I was laid off from my employer at the time, I started to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to ever feel hopeless. I don't want to ever feel like, I'm going to be at the mercy of an employer if for any reason the stock market, goes afloat. So I wanted to take control of my life. So what I started to do is figure out, what could I do that would allow me to, one, be in control, but at the same time align with my purpose. In 2009, I came across a quote that I think changed my life and put me on this path. And that was, when your life is on course with its purpose, you are your most powerful. So I put this quote, had a Xerox and printed and put on my fridge. And I memorized it. And it's on my business cards. It's just literally a part of who I am, trying to figure out how I can, one, effectively do something that I can be passionate about, but at the same time, be able to take care of myself and my family. That actually led me to real estate. And in 2017, after starting a few different businesses and it not going as planned, in 2017, I made a promise to my dad that I wanted to get my real estate license. And I was still working in the corporate world at the time. And 2017, I went to Minnesota School of Realty, but I always knew that I wanted to do something even bigger than just selling real estate. It was always in my head, like, what can I do to really make an impact? After getting my real estate license, I started making some different connections with friends and family. And then it was one introduction from a friend that was a previous board member for the St. Paul Chamber, the St. Paul area chamber that we both belonged to, connected me to Rich Packinen. And at the time, the only developer I knew was Donald Trump. So I said, well, sure, I'll take the meeting. So we met, and I just, there was a sense of freedom and vibrance and something that exuded from our first interaction when we met. And I wanted to know what he did that gave him this smile, that gave him this joy that I've longed for throughout my life. I'd seen a few people that express that same emotion, that same energy, folks that were in control, as I mentioned earlier. They were in control of their destiny. And I wanted to be in that same light. So we started talking more. And, at the time I was obviously a licensed, realtor, just got my license. But most importantly, I knew nothing about development. And after that meeting, he made a few key introductions. One, obviously, to be Kyle, president of the St. Paul Area Chamber. And then from that meeting, she connected me to a wealth of different individuals, both politically and government, for the city of St. Paul. And at the time, I still didn't know I wanted to do development. I just knew that I wanted to do something that was going to be impactful and allowed me to align with my purpose, but do something bigger. I just kept on thinking about my dad in hindsight, and his struggles and challenges, both from a health standpoint, but also from a living standpoint in terms of his health mentally, and him always complaining about, this is where I live at, and the dilapidated, conditions and the lack of empathy from the property management staff, and me getting calls late at night, having to come and see him because of something or whatever the case may be. And I just knew that my father having, this type of pressure on him is not good for anybody in terms of stress and dealing with, just the ordeals of living and being a human being. So I made him a promise. I said, hey, I'm going to build you something. And, one thing you don't want to do is make a promise to my dad, Leah, and not fulfill that promise. I told him I wanted to go to law school. I took the LSAT twice. That didn't go as planned. And I wanted to go to business school. But I think more importantly, I wanted to just impress him. I wanted to make him proud of his son. as the first son, and coming from Nigeria. So I wanted him to know that I was taking my life and education seriously, and that I was going to finish what I started. So when I made him that promise, he said, "Okay, all right." From that meeting with Rich to President B. Kyle and to some key political figures in St. Paul, that allowed me to really kind of think that maybe this is possible. One key meeting with Councilmember Jane Prince, I think, really put me on this path. We met and we talked about, some of the things that I wanted to do. And she had mentioned a site that has been vacant for a long time at 520 Payne Avenue. And I went to the site after our meeting. I literally drove to the site like fast. I saw the site and I saw the hollows, clear as day. I saw it literally right before my eyes. And I called her and said, "Hey, I want this site." And then we started that process in 2018, which led me to me becoming a developer at this point in my life.
Wow. So many different important twists and turns in your life. And what if you didn't accept that meeting with Rich Packenhut?
Yeah, what's interesting is that I always feel that, since I was young, I've been in the relationship business. I've been in the people business since I was a kid. My first job was at Vecchio's Italian Pizza when I was 14. I asked my mom to buy me some shoes. She said no, because they were too expensive. And she said, "Well, go get a job." And knowing who I am, I'm very determined, very motivated. I don't need a lot of people to motivate me. It's just inside of me. And I got my job 14 years old, and I've been working ever since. So for me, if you give me an opportunity, I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to act on it immediately. I'm not going to let an opportunity pass me by, regardless of what the situation may be. I don't see no, I just see try again, period. That's all I see. I just see try again, try again, try again. And when you have the mentality, I don't think anybody can stop you, period. And my mother raised me with a mentality that we're all human beings. Yeah. So if we're all human beings, what's there to fear from someone else, right? So you might as well just try to break through that wall and get to wherever the end goal is for you that you want to get to. And hopefully along that path, you're going to have some learning, some learning opportunities, some lessons that you're learning. But most importantly, when you get to the end goal, you'll be so much more appreciative of that process. And then you'll say, "Hey, you know what? Wow, I've actually, not only taken advantage of this opportunity that was, bestowed upon me, but more importantly, I've been able to get across the finish line." And that's what I equate to the Hollows. The Hollows was more of a culmination of one, learning more about who I am as a human being, learning more about who I am as a professional, learning more about, is this the path that God has destined me for? And then more importantly, when you take someone who just got married, a wife that's pregnant, you're talking to her about becoming an entrepreneur. And at the same time, you're trying to figure out this interesting vertical called real estate development, understanding how it works from a political standpoint, government, community relations, development. You have no experience, construction, finding partners potentially, looking at it from an equity and debt standpoint. It's a culmination of things that throughout the last almost 5 years that I've learned so much that I wouldn't have changed anything. All the no's. But I'm definitely a different human being now, and I'm very appreciative for organizations like LISC, who have been probably my biggest and one of my notable supporters at the genesis of when I got into real estate development.
So let's keep talking about a little bit more about your project. You just recently closed on the Hollows. Can you give us a little bit of a better understanding of what the spec is of that property? To me, it's an enormous property. For somebody this is your first development project, and you cut your teeth on something huge, which when you learn or hear about your background, it makes total sense. And I'd like to really understand what challenges you faced getting to that point where you were actually closing on the Hollows.
The Hollows is a 62-unit multifamily development at 520 Penn Avenue. It's 4 stories, underground parking to below grade. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. Going through the design process, I wanted to make sure that it exemplified St. Paul at its core. It's in the Sweetie Hollow neighborhood. That's what we call it, the Hollows. This site has been vacant for 30 plus years, as I mentioned earlier, since 1996. I really wanted to do something that was transformative. There was a nearby business called State Supply. I remember I met with the owners and I talked to them about, my vision. And the T word came out, Johnny, this would be a transformative project for this neighborhood. And to think that 62 families or individuals, households will gain access to a high quality building that's sustainable, that meets SB 2030 standards in terms of climate change, environmental, and but more importantly, giving individuals and families access to high quality housing. I specifically made sure that the Hollows was market rate design. It's one of the reasons why I selected Doran Companies, because that's all they do is market rate buildings. And I've been in their buildings before and they're absolutely fabulous. So I wanted to make sure we can replicate that model, right? By giving individuals like my father and families the opportunity to live somewhere nice that's market rate design, but reflects their economics, then it's a win-win situation. We have 4 unit types, we have alcoves, we have studios, we have 1 bedrooms, and we also have 2 bedrooms, right? This is workforce housing. So this is 60% area median income for the majority. We also have fair market value rents, and we also have 5 units that are deeply affordable. So 5 units are at 30% AMI. So you're getting a range of different economics in terms of rents that's being provided for the Hollows. But most importantly, you're going to get a wealth of different individuals as well that one can learn from one another. And I think too, when you give someone something nice, let's just say hypothetically speaking, you walk into the Hollows and for some reason there's a piece of paper or Kleenex or something on the ground and there's a trash can nearby. My mentality, how I think is that you love living at the Hollows so much that you don't want to see that on the ground. So naturally, you're going to just pick it up and throw it away because that's how much pride you have for where you stay at. Then also, the Hollows is student friendly. We're not too far from Metropolitan State University. I've met with their executive team, everyone from their president down, and talked about this vision that I had not too far from Metropolitan State University. So part-time students that are working full-time that want to live close to campus or live close to their school, this could be a perfect opportunity for them as well. We're on a transit. So folks that don't have access to transportation, reliable transportation, well, there's a major bus that's adjacent from the property. So I think for me, one, you're going to have access to major highways, access to downtown St. Paul, Lower Town, access to transit, access to high quality education in terms of Metropolitan State University, access to major employers. You're going to be literally 20 minutes from the Mall of America and 15 minutes from downtown Minneapolis. And you're going to be overlooking the downtown skyline in addition to the Mississippi River. If you look at all the things that I just described, it's set up for success. And I think the Hollows, in my opinion, is my baby. But more importantly, it's a culmination of everything from doing a design charrette with the community and literally listening to them in terms of what they want built on site, building a partnership with the adjacent property, the Sweet Hollow Brownstones. That's 4 years in the making. In my first meeting, they were opposed to the entire idea of doing a development on that site. And then 4 years later, they signed an easement agreement saying, hey, we're on board. So when you push through and you keep fighting for something that you believe in, eventually good things will happen.
Access is really, really important, isn't it? So when you think about development and the way you're thinking about development, it is really, really important that for you to be able to provide that access or to locate your properties where transit is going to be available to everyone, all of your residents, so that they can get from point A to point B, but also it really aligns with your values, I think. And so I really, really, really applaud you for that. Johnny, what do you see as the number one barrier for people of color interested in real estate development?
That's a great question. And to kind of piggyback on what you said earlier. So my father relied on metro mobility, transit immensely because, when you have a stroke, you're limited in terms of your physicality, right? So metro mobility, the metro bus, on how he was able to take transportation to doctor's appointments, to the library. If I wasn't able to pick him up, that was a big reason why when we looked at places for him, did he have access to transit if I wasn't able to pick him up, or if his PCA, or if my uncle wasn't able to pick them up and take them somewhere. So having access to transit in all the locations that I'm working on for these projects is immensely important. Every single location I'm working on, I promise you, either there's a light rail or there's a bus stop adjacent to the property or close by. So the number one barrier, I think, in my opinion, is going to be capital, capital, and capital. And of course, education. And the reason why in this field, LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, affordable housing, there's only a select few of people, individuals, organizations that understand the dynamics of this world. It's one thing to do just, Johnny, I want to buy a 4-unit or 8-unit, multifamily flats, whatever the case may be. We can do those deals all day. But anytime you enter into, tax credits and understanding how that process works, it takes time to understand how that world works. So capital in terms of pre-developments, there's costs associated with, land and site control. There's costs associated with applications. There's costs associated with architects, costs associated with civil. There's so much money that's going to be required for someone just getting into the game versus closing, that it's going to be a huge barrier, especially for folks that are underrepresented, that don't have access to these institutions that are providing capital in order for us to be able to take these projects into fruition. So capital, capital, capital. We need more access to capital in order for us to be the true owners and operators within our communities that we're building in.
Capital is a huge barrier for us on all the verticals, if you will. But I totally understand how it can really be an immediate, just huge wall that separates people as it relates to our ability to get involved in real estate, of all things, because it is a rich person's game, if you will. And if you don't have deep pockets for all those reasons that you identified and more, then as soon as you get started, you stop.
Yeah, no, I mean, and even in addition to that, one of the things that I learned, and you made some pretty good points in that, is just even from a pre-development standpoint, they're going to require a personal financial statement. They're going to want to look at your taxes. What is your liquidity? What is your net worth? And if you don't check these boxes, well, then that means you may have to partner with someone that has the liquidity, that has the net worth. And then depending on your vision from the beginning, that may change now that you have someone else that has veto rights, right? So if you wanted to build this building, right, and you don't have the liquidity and the net worth, and the tax credit investor or the syndicator says, hey, we can't do this deal unless you bring someone that has experience or has, liquidity or the net worth, and then that person comes along and they're not mission oriented, they're more focused on, the developer fee and, what they can make, then your project potentially could actually go sideways in terms of your vision. So that's why it's very, very, very important to know all these things ahead of time. So if you do need a partner, right? If you do need a partner, you can start figuring out what you're willing to be flexible on and what you're not willing to be flexible on. So that when you're having these conversations, it's very pointed. So philosophy is this: always try to be passionate about the vision, but flexible on the details.
Mm-hmm.
Passionate about the vision, but be flexible on the details. So I always knew that I wanted to do something special. When we started working on the hollows, I kind of had this sense of what I wanted it to look like, what I wanted it to be. But then, when you factor in, the costs, when you factor in all the different obstacles it's going to take to get to the finish line, you have to be flexible. So the passion has always been there in terms of getting to the end goal across the finish line. But you have to have the ability to adapt to new situations and new conversations, whether that be with the city, whether that be with the investor, whether that be with the lender, you name it. And I think that actually applies in any kind of business, in any kind of endeavor, that application. So I would say, obviously pre-development, gaining capital is going to be definitely a huge need for underrepresented developers, people of color, women, but more importantly, the education behind it and understanding what do these banks, what do these investors, what do they need? What do they look for? How can you reduce their uncertainty? How can you make them more comfortable? Understanding that you have a lack of experience when it comes from a construction standpoint, a lack of experience when it comes to affordable housing development. How can you get them comfortable? And one of the ways you can do that is having an all-star team, period. If you have a lawyer that has been well-versed and experienced in this space, that gets them comfortable. If you have a CPA, same thing. GC, architect, civil, you name it. And now you have an opportunity to learn from all these different folks, all these different organizations, by and large, you have no choice but to learn when you're surrounded by these individuals. And that gets the bank, that gets the investor very comfortable in knowing that, okay, if we get to the finish line and across, he or she now has an all-star team. And what's going to end up happening is that throughout this process, you're learning. And now that you have one completed project under your belt, the second deal, not necessarily is going to be easier, but now you understand what it takes to do these deals and get it across the finish line.
We talk about access, we talk about your vision, but how do you, in the midst of the challenges as you describe them, the equity challenge, how do you commit to that vision when there's just all these different barriers, all these things coming at you that constantly put you back in that space where the lack of equity is really going to slow me down. It requires me to make some adjustments, but still keep to your vision. What is that inside of you that has allowed you to do that?
I remember just walking kind of aimlessly when I was a teen, trying to figure out, what am I going to do, with my life? And as I mentioned earlier, I always knew that I wanted to do something that was going to be impactful. I just don't want to, collect a paycheck and that's my life. I worked for 30 years and that's it. I wanted to figure out how I can do something that's special, that resonates with who I am inside. And on that path, you have different iterations in terms of, where your life goes. And I wouldn't change any of those paths that I took, both professionally and personally, because it made me the person that I am today. But I think what pushed me through was, knowing that, one, I'm an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 1 year old, and I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity that was given to me by coming to this country, doing something that was going to be great, impactful. The same story that for so many that come to this country wanted to aspire and, be a part of the American dream. And for me, I just knew in my heart that I wanted to do something impactful, big, that allowed me to really showcase who I am in terms of my life experiences, but also have a human connection. And I think with all the no's, every single tax credit syndicator you can probably think of, everyone said no. Everybody said no. I promise you, everybody said no. And as I said earlier, I saw this try again. I think the big thing that got me really thinking that this thing could actually get to this point and close was when I sat down with Rich on his birthday. And he told me, you know what, Johnny, I did my first deal by myself. I don't know why you can't do your first deal by yourself. And when he said that, he was referencing in terms of at 100%, meaning that there's no partners. Historically speaking, that just does not happen. I promise you, for a first-time developer. So when he said that, he said, bring this deal to the finish line, get everything in motion, bring this deal to the finish line. And what I did was I basically just continued to push through. At one point I was working, 4 or 5 jobs. I bootstrapped this deal, liquidated my 401k. At one point, I was selling houses, working a full-time job, delivering packages, modeling and acting, whatever it took to bootstrap this deal and take care of my family at the same time to get to this point. A lot of people didn't know that because they just saw what they saw. And I was very quiet about this. A lot of people didn't know I was doing development. And, the best advice I got from my wife was just be quiet and let the building talk. And I think that was probably one of the best advice I received, besides the continuous support from, the riches of the world and so many people throughout this process that played a role in me getting to this point. So, just continually fighting through and obviously just fulfilling the promise I made to the community that I was going to bring housing that was market rate and design and that was affordable. We are underbuilt as a population, even though wages are increasing, which is a good thing. We still need access to housing, whether that be, affordable, market rate, owner occupied, we are still underbuilt as a population. That's why you're seeing the rents the way they are and why, homes are selling for record prices just due to the limited inventory. So there's a huge opportunity for us to do something here in development. And I just really want to be a part of that.
That's a really good segue for us to start talking a little bit about one of the other things that connects you and I, and that is LISC and the LISC initiative, really targeting developers of color, helping developers of color actually get over those thresholds or those barriers to and cross the finish line, right, in their real estate ventures. I actually got connected with LISC several years ago when I was approached to consider actually leading a study to uncover and name the specific capacity barriers that developers.
I was there.
I know you were. You agreed to an interview with me and several other meetings, which was really great. I had met you a few years before then through Rich. So I kind of felt like maybe he'll say yes. That work and that engagement with LISC has really culminated in creating an opportunity for the organization to actually really engage in some transformative change and to do something here in the Twin Cities that has yet to be done. And so in 2021, I got to always remember we're in 22, LISC initiated or launched its Developers of Color initiative. And so I'm really interested in knowing from you as a member of the inaugural development cohort, what has the program offered that has really helped you?
Lee, I want to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge your leadership and your continued support. I mean, when we first met, you had this presence, this embodiment that you really want people of color, women, just people in general to succeed. And I just want to acknowledge you publicly and just let everyone know that you've been, one of my biggest supporters. We're grateful to have you in this space. And it's amazing to see you just continue to, thrive and, just be your authentic self. And I think for people like me who have longed to be their authentic selves without any repercussion, it's great to see someone else doing the same. So I appreciate your leadership and your friendship. I think LISC as an organization has, one, they've been there for me since 2018. They've actually put their money where their mouth is and helped me with many of my big ideas and said, hey, Johnny, okay, we'll support you. But to be a part of the inaugural Developers of Color cohort has been very interesting and very insightful, and has allowed me to connect with other like-minded individuals who are aspiring to do great things in our community. So it's been a privilege and an honor to be a part of this cohort. And I'm just happy to see that there's other folks that are looking to, create change in their own way, authentically. And everyone's starting from different places professionally. Some are looking at doing single families, some are looking at doing multifamily, and some are looking at doing, larger scale projects. But the bottom line is that from a collaborative standpoint, we can all come together collectively once a month like we did and really talk about different things that would, be on the agenda, from having, speakers from a city perspective speak, talking about the importance of understanding pro formas, financial acumen, relationships, with different capital structures such as venture capitalism, just understanding how the different parts of development works and how LISC was able to bring those relationships over the years that they've built and expose the cohort to them, I think has been extremely gratifying and very important. And I must say, because I've been at this for the last 4.5, 5 years, I've always tried to ask very pointed questions when folks would come on, because I wanted to really make sure that, and I equate this to the Kobe Bryant approach. Kobe Bryant is my favorite player, but he really looked at Michael Jordan as the height, as the ultimate. So for me, Michael provided him, like a pathway, like a dictionary in terms of how to be great, that allowed him to get to the finish line, some may say a little quicker. So I always equated to, well, if there's an opportunity, if I've already bumped my head a whole bunch of times if I have an opportunity to allow you not to bump your head that many times, well, then let me at least give you that information. So that way you can get to the finish line even quicker. So I say that, so, I that's the role that I really try to play in the cohort, because there's a lot of things that people don't know that we go through just in the space and development that doesn't even require communication. It could be just a simple look. You could be in a meeting and you could be ignored because you have no experience, or you could be bypassed because, who are you, Johnny? You just got into development and I've been doing this for 20 years. So there's a lot of things that are very subtle that I've had to kind of, navigate and learn and understand that this is just part of the process. And I've always tried to, hopefully be a source of realism in terms of, this is not Walt Disney World, I can promise you. And it sounds sexy to be a developer. I promise you that once you get into it, it's not as sexy.
Yeah, it's a really tough job. There's a heavy lift, and you don't have instant gratification.
Absolutely. It's something that over time, I think when I closed on December 23rd of last year, it didn't really hit me. We closed, I spoke to my attorney and a few folks on the development team. I spoke to the lender. I spoke to US Bank. US Bank, by the way, is a tax credit investor on the deal, and Redstone is doing the debt and new construction financing on the deal. Obviously, the city of St. Paul, of course, provided taxes and bonds and TIF and pool TIF. So those three partners were instrumental in getting this deal across the finish line. So let me recognize the city of St. Paul, US Bank, and Redstone. Obviously, Met Council, Ramsey County, LISC, Department of Deed were all instrumental in terms of my capital stack that allowed me to be able to, get the Hollows to where it's at right now. But, I would say that it's just been an interesting ride, and seeing how, development has its turns and twists. But when I closed, it wasn't until I saw the site actually start to get built live right in front of me that, wow, this is really happening. See that we're out the ground, finished precast. We're just going to be putting down a slab of concrete and then start backfilling next week. We just finished L1 in terms of framing, which is the first level. We're going to start framing next week for the second level. So when you start to see that, that's when it really hit me, right? That's when I'm like, okay, this thing is actually really happening. And then we're probably 20%, 25% complete. We should be open by January 4th of 2023. So to know that we're at like the 5-month mark and know there's like 7 months left is kind of getting eerie, knowing that by this time next year, that there'll be individuals and families actually living there. So it's a beautiful thing. But for me, I'm so humbled, so grateful for this opportunity to know that all the hard work that so many people that have sacrificed and spent so many hours on, helping me get to this point, it was not for nothing. Now, there's actually people that's going to benefit from all those long hours, because literally from the time that we started, working toward the closing, we were working on Saturdays, we were working on Sundays, just to be able to meet this December 23rd closing.
I want to ask you another question in relation to the LISC program. As we've both been saying, this was the inaugural year. You're part of the first cohort. And when we think about it in terms of continuation, the importance of continuation, can you speak to the broader need for this as it relates to changing the landscape for developers of color, people of color, the impact that this program could potentially have, in answering a wide need to address racial equity in development, but also serve as a catalyst for change in other verticals, so that the legacy of exclusion and intentionality is reversed?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Earlier this week, actually it was last week, I went to Milwaukee for the Develop Affordable Housing conference that was hosted and put on by Baker Tilly. And I got a chance to partake in a conference that their focus was bringing underrepresented developers across the country together to talk about affordable housing. So Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois was present in terms of their presence in working with underrepresented developers, people of color, women, et cetera. And, one of the things that were discussed was the need for capital, access, influence, relationships that have been built over the last 20, 30 years. In CRE, commercial real estate, we only make up 0.001%. So it's extremely rare that you see folks that look like you and me, Leah, and women that are in the prime position of being a developer. It's just not, it's not prominent. When I was in corporate America, I was always the only one that looked like me in a lot of my meetings. And it's still the same case in development. So we definitely need more opportunities where we can have programs like the Developers of Color cohort to expose and to help individuals that are truly interested in this space and making a change. We need more of it. And I think if it's done in the right way, the right context, it can have a ripple effect, and people across the country can really benefit from this vertical. That exact same mindset, as you had pointed out earlier, could be applied to other verticals as well, whether that be in tech, whether that be in, you wanted to get into a different field. The bottom line is that as long as we can gain access to the needed capital, but also the education that comes with it and behind it, because the last thing you want to do is give somebody capital, but they don't know how to utilize it. They don't know how to strategically place it. That's where the education comes in. If you know how to manage that budget, if you know how to manage those dollars in the right way, then we're having a completely different conversation, right? That business is going to be set up for success. Yeah, we definitely need more opportunities to get folks who are truly interested. And I mean that by saying, I was asked this weekend, Johnny, what is the developer fee? And I get really weird when I talk about that number, because I feel like that shouldn't be the reason why you want to do affordable housing, right? I think the reason why you should do affordable housing is because you truly know that as a population, as a country, we're underbuilt. And there are some folks that are working full-time jobs that have kids, and they're homeless because there's just no more housing that's available that reflects their economics. So you should, if you want to get into affordable housing or get into any kind of development, yes, there's a generational wealth aspect that's associated with this line of work, with this business as the owner and operator. But more importantly, if you're looking at getting into the development because you truly want to impact people's lives, impact the community, then that should be the reason. Because I just remember as a kid, living at these townhouses in Roseville. It was a 3-story townhouse. It was beautiful. Absolutely. So many memories were created on that site where we lived at. I found out 20 years later that it was affordable. I had no idea. And I actually lost to that developer that developed those townhouses on a site in Brooklyn Park. We actually came in second. He came in first. So when you think about those experiences, you would never know. So I think we definitely need folks that look like you and me, Leah, in this space, especially if you're building in our communities where we're, more prevalent. I think it makes sense to, have programs like the Developers of Color cohort develop, with Baker Tilly to really put a magnifying glass on this industry and making sure that everyone from the banks, lenders, investors, people that are connected politically in government really pay attention to this conversation and figure out how we can do more.
I think that the Developers of Color initiative is capable of actually achieving transformational change. And that's key to disrupting systemic racism. And it's essential in driving social capital and ownership that we're talking about. And you're right, it's not just one thing. It's not just financial capital, it's also knowledge capital, it's also social capital. We are very clear when you even think about your story and the people that you have actually been able to connect with, you've been able to benefit from. Your network is your net worth.
Absolutely.
All of those things are critically important. And LISC plays a real fundamental role in that it can open those doors. It can create those opportunities for us to gain the knowledge that we need or that we don't currently have because of the system closing us out, as well as, access to the financial capital that we need. And to really, I think LISC is also uniquely situated to actually be stronger advocates for change from a systemic perspective, to influence the others within the system, within the ecosystem, to adjust based on the reality or the history that we're actually trying to dismantle that systemically has oppressed people of color. So I think it's a very, very important initiative. It's bold. It requires leadership, and that's what LISC brings to the table. People like Peter McLaughlin, Gretchen Nichols, Kate Speed, Amy McCullough. I mean, those are the individuals that are really fighting that fight and believe that this is really a direction that we need to take. And they have brought that kind of bold leadership here to the Twin Cities, where we haven't seen it before. And the Twin Cities being one of the states that, if we recall, in the last decade, and this has been going on longer than that, but there was a light shined on the Twin Cities as it relates to where we stand in this country around poverty and what the drivers are around poverty, and how we were second to Mississippi. And that, that the oppression, the systemic racist system that's here in the Twin Cities has had to be addressed. And so it has taken us, or brought us, to this point here where we've had a number of key events that have happened that have given us voice as a people of color, where we're starting to also do our part to demand even more and greater access. And so you're an example of that as well. So there is a lot that has changed, a lot that needs to continue to change. I'm extremely optimistic about that. And I'm also very excited for what you're doing. I'm excited to be a part of, in whatever way I can be of value to you, to LISC, and to this community. It's really, really important to me. So I want to ask you, what's the legacy that you want to leave as it relates to you could talk about it related to development. How do you want to influence development in the future? Or you can talk about it broader as it relates to our community as a whole.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. I was having this conversation with someone the other day in terms of all the money that organizations are pouring into, whether it be geared towards diversity, inclusion, making sure that there's funding available for minorities, et cetera, et cetera. For me, I feel like that's a great cause, a great mission. But I think that if there's going to be a fund of $100 million available for people of color or people in development, let there be some education, let there be some meaning behind it, not just here's the $100 million. And then also, to gain access to that $100 million, let there be less training versus more, in order for us to be able to gain access to it. So in terms of legacy, my father passed away in 2018 at the heart of when I was going through this process as becoming a developer. And the last words he said to my uncle, I was in California trying to process his death, was that my son was going to be a developer. So for me, I didn't want to let him down, even though he was no longer here. I wanted to make sure that I actually fulfilled the promise that we had talked about, when he was alive. For me, I think the legacy that JO companies, myself, that anything that I'm attached to, my hope is that people can say, Johnny was a decent human being, and he really tried to look out for other human beings as much as possible, especially people that needed more help than others. I come across so many people that are maybe had a brain tumor, or had a stroke, or had some kind of accident, and they walk a similar type of way like my father. And for some reason, a level of empathy, a level of, let me go talk to this person comes over me. There's this guy at the gym that saw me this morning, And he reminds me of my dad because they walk exactly the same. And we built a friendship, a kinship. So every time he sees me, I acknowledge him. We talk about life. So for me, I really just want people to know that Johnny was trying to do his part as a human being by creating housing that's affordable, but more importantly, high quality housing, because there's going to be families, there's going to be kids that are going to be living there at the Hollows and other projects I'm working on that have no idea who I am, but they're going to be able to create memories at those kitchen tables. And you can't put a price point on that. There's no amount of money you can make in this business that can equate or replicate that feeling that my sister, that my brother, that I had, that my mom and my dad at the kitchen table, that I can think back so many times, and probably you as well, growing up, of those moments. So for me, knowing that I'm playing a part in creating those types of experiences is an immense respect, and it's a humbling position to be in, to know that I could partake in those types of experiences. So for me, I just want people to know that I really am trying to do my part in our community, and be someone that can hopefully inspire those that are trying to figure out what their purpose is, trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do with my life? And they're getting rejected, they're getting no's after no's after no's after no's, year after year after year after year. But this guy, born in Nigeria, came in when he was 1 year old, went to school here in the Twin Cities, quit his job, and got on this entrepreneur path. He did it. Well, why can't I? So hopefully that can set as some kind of foundation, some kind of opportunity for people to say, hey, you know what, if Johnny can do it, why can't I? And knowing that if you want to get into development, no, it's not easy. It's absolutely hard. And it's hard for a reason, because when you put money, into these projects, and you don't know what you're doing, your risk level goes up, and your risk tolerance, specifically for these banks in the city and investors, is very low. So you need to make sure that you know what you're doing, and that you're serious about this work, that you're engaged, that you're really trying to understand in totality about what can you do to err on the side of, being not only caution, but more importantly, that you're taking this position that only so few have been in, and you're taking it very seriously to make sure that you can do it again and again and again and again throughout the communities that you want to build in. So that's the legacy that I would like to leave when it comes to my company and myself.
Very inspiring. Very inspiring. So Johnny, in closing, how can people get in touch with you or see your projects?
Well, right now, you can go to www.jlcompanies.org. You'll see the latest news on the different projects. Right now, we have about north of 100+ million in our development pipeline. So we have the Hollows, obviously, that will be completed January 4th of next year. We're actually, which is good news, we're actually on course to actually finish sooner than that, which would be fantastic. We have Wangstead Commons, which is the 54-unit development in Brooklyn Center that I've been working on since 2019 with the city of Brooklyn Center, on a 4-story multifamily development that's actually interesting. It's going to include 16 units of supportive housing, so geared towards people with disabilities and high priority homeless, and the remaining units for your general population ranges of AMIs from 30% AMI upwards to 60%. And what's interesting about that project, this will be one of the first to include 4 bedrooms as well, which is on the top of the list for things that Minnesota Housing is looking for in terms of including in multifamily. We have a 200 to 300 unit project in St. Paul. My business partners, we own 15 acres of land in St. Paul, so we're looking at bringing some housing that's affordable to the Greater East Side in St. Paul as well. And got some other opportunities I'm working on in the suburbs, and looking at some things out of state. But we're just staying busy, trying to stay optimistic when you're seeing inflation at its highest and interest rates going super high and construction, pricing, through the roof. But if you wait to do these types of deals, then you'll never do them. You got to figure out how you can be creative and figure out, how you can make these things work, whether that be through value engineering, thinking outside the box, looking at new different strategies in terms of construction. What can the project sacrifice or not? This is how development is done. And I think that I found my path. I found my purpose in terms of this work. I enjoy it. I could do it 24 hours a day. And, I wasn't paid for 4.5, 5 years. So I enjoyed it the exact same way. So for me, that's when I knew I was actually in alignment with what I was supposed to do. So if anyone ever has any questions, feel free to contact me through my website. But, a lot of good things are happening for the company. So we're very excited.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and for imparting your wisdom, and your vision is amazing and it's needed. Just wishing you just the greatest of our Lord's blessings.
Amen.
And with that, I'll say adieu.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thanks for joining us. The Talking Kidways podcast is a project of The Overhead Wire and posted first at Streetsblog USA. Thanks to our wonderful Patreon supporters for sponsoring this show and Mondays at The Overhead Wire. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. You can sign up for our 15-year-old newsletter at theoverheadwire.com. And you can listen to the show on your podcatcher of choice, including Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. And if you can't find it there, you can always find it at its original home at usa.streetsblog.org. We'll see you next time at Talking Kidways.